here we go, another episode about building the Volgatti, which took 3 months. In the end, the car started to look like an actual carrier at least. The rear part does for now, but let's take it step by step. Enjoy watching. A year ago, in one of the previous episodes, we started working on the rear lights. Back then, we needed their shape in order to finish the rear bumper. We cut them out using a wooden model, specifically from pear and maple. Pear was used for the finer, more detailed elements, while maple filled out the main volume. Here, we relied on the properties of these types of wood. As a result, after a day of work, we ended up with this kind of construction set and moved on from there. In the same way, using CNC and wood, we made these inner parts of the taillights. Later on, they will be needed to create the matching part and make a clever mold. But for now, it takes several hundred hours for gluing, finishing, fitting and sanding. The next stage, when all the wooden the sound is repeated again and again, over and over, echoing continuously. The next stage, when all the wooden and other elements are ready, is to prime them, then putty them again, sand them down and level the surfaces. And repeat this a couple of times. If you play this game, you can simply make changes. Rework everything bad into something good. Take the bad, don't talk, turn it into a game. Take the best. After a couple of Andre days, we have perfect blanks, but they're still wood. But what we really want are plastic and transparent ones. To do that, we need to make silicone molds. That's exactly why we built this sarcophagi, which we coat with silicone and smooth out all around.
We'll be pouring the silicone molds into these little boxes. This is where the lights will be cast. And now we're going to prepare these blanks for mold removal. We need to sand down the polyester primer, polish it, and apply release wax to them. We'll try to sand out all the details, texture, and imperfections on the polyester primer. As always, guide powder will help us with that. Yes. We rub it in, that's right on it. And with a steel, yes. And we sand it. I've already knocked down the texture with a 320 grit sanding block. Next, we take a soft 600 grit sponge and carefully sand it by hand, evening out the scratches. Over it with an even finer grit. In this case, I'll finish with a 1000 grit, which I'll use as the base for waxing. Again, the guide powder will help us. The next step is to apply a wax release agent so the mold separates more easily. In this case, we'll use hard wax. We rub the part with it.
After the part is thoroughly waxed, it needs to be placed in the formwork, but in such a way that it is suspended in the air. To do this, we glue it onto wooden spacers and place it in the formwork. Repeat this process with all the blanks. This is done so that the silicone fills the volume evenly from all sides and, once cured, gives us a strong, reliable, reusable mold. Finally, we move on to silicone itself. This is a 2-component compound specifically designed for making molds. It's an excellent product. Highly recommend. Link in the description. Subtitles provided by Diamond Rock for this video. With the main lights, it's simple. We pour them once and let them dry. But with the central narrow element, things aren't straightforward.
We decided to make the silicone mold in 2 separate parts for better results. We've already poured the first part and our piece is now half submerged in the silicone. Now, we'll carefully apply release wax so that the 2 halves don't stick together. We need to make sprues. These will be plastic tubes through which the plastic will be poured, as well as vents for air to escape. In our case, we'll use hot glue sticks for this. Let's get to work.
But while Andre is getting started, let me drop a little spoiler. All this work being done on the central headlight ended up being for nothing, because our plan changed. We had to redo the process. And all those buckets of silicone and 3 hours and on-camera explanations went straight into the trash. But Andrei doesn't know that yet. Let's hear him out.
We carefully removed our wooden support that the part was hanging from, since it wasn't actually touching the bottom of the box at all, but instead was suspended up in the air on these wooden pieces, making sure everything stays in place. The part has been waxed and our little tubes fell off. That's okay, we'll just glue them back in the same spot, and since there's no wax there now, they'll stick fine. See, they're standing properly now. Alright.
The next step is to apply a release agent to the dried layer of silicone. This is a spray wax, and after that we pour on another bucket of silicone. The next day the silicone has dried, and we finally get to unwrap our Christmas present. Although, judging by Andrei's reaction, he clearly has other associations with this thing. We are taking apart the formwork. And here, by the way, you can clearly see how this technology works. I have to give credit, it turned out perfectly. You can easily make such complex shapes, but unfortunately not in our case. Initially, we planned to pour casting plastic into this mold, paint it and get a finished part. But later on the plans changed a bit. However, with the main headlights, the plan stayed the same. It's the same story here, but the form is a little simpler, or rather, it's a bit simpler for now. And now we need to fix that. At this point we've obtained the cast of the outer part of the headlight, but obviously the housing needs to be hollow inside. To do this, we assemble the formwork again, put the mold inside, and finish the matching inner part, which should fit into the previous silicone mold. But even here, it's not that simple. On the original Bugatti headlights, there's an inscription like this.
We continue working on the blanks for our future headlights. The next step is to stick the inscription on here. On the original, it said Bugatti, but of course, ours will say Volgatti. A bonus challenge is to glue on these tiny rings, cut out of 2mm polycarbonate. Try not to glue your fingers together or mess up these blanks with super glue. I have no idea how this is going to go yet, but it's clear that it's going to be difficult.
Yes, it really wasn't easy, but the funniest thing is that this work ended up being pointless anyway. In fact, during the process, it became clear that there was a much simpler way to do it. In the end, the inscription will still be there, of course, but we'll put it on the inner element instead. That way it will be easier and visually there will be no difference at all. But we'll get to that a bit later.
A jeweler's approach to his craft. Subtitles by Dima Torzok. Subtitles by Dima Torzok.
Now we need to make exactly the same elements, but out of silicone. For this, we make a mold out of silicone, so that we can cast another mold from silicone. I don't even know how to properly explain this. Let Andrei figure it out.
Our silicone mold has set, so let's start carefully unpacking it. This is always a really exciting and quite fascinating moment, because something could actually go wrong and something might just not work out. But we'll only find out once we open it. We take our blank out of the mold for the mold, because this is just an intermediate step. And next we'll pour silicone inside to make this part out of silicone, so that we can then insert this silicone part into the mold and cast a hollow glass-like piece from colored epoxy resin. In short, it's all very complicated. One thing I realized while working with silicone, when I was casting this part of the taillight, I did it in such a way that the part was suspended from above, and when the silicone was poured in, the bubbles in the silicone would hit the opposite side of the taillight, and the mold, to put it mildly, turned out less than perfect. There are bubbles present, but when I was making this part, the piece was lying at the bottom of the mold and the silicone was poured upwards. That way, all the bubbles rose to the top. These things seem obvious, but you only really understand them after you've made a few mistakes. Everything becomes clear, but only afterwards. Here is my first experience with silicone. You can see the bubbles that got stuck against the part because the part was suspended and they ended up trapped in this kind of lock. And here's my second little part. All the bubbles stayed here. Here they are. Yes, of course, you really need a degasser. We'll get to that later. But step by step, we're moving forward and delving into the fascinating subtleties and intricate details of the silicone casting process. In this mold, we'll carefully cast this silicone piece. This part will be suspended right here, held in place, and the space between them will gradually become the delicate shell of our lantern. Into this shell, we will pour colored epoxy resin, which will flow into every nook and cranny, filling the void and forming the lantern's outer layer. This process not only results in a beautiful and functional lantern, but also brings us happiness and a sense of accomplishment as our creative vision comes to life. Preparatory work before pouring. I made this mold using a simplified method with a disposable formwork, since I realized that this way I could definitely save both time and effort during production. We set it level, and to prevent it from bulging during pouring, we'll brace it with these slats and clamps just to be sure. The clamps refused to work, but tape came to our rescue perfectly. I came up with this construction to suspend our matrix within the matrix. I fixed it in place with hot glue so it wouldn't float up, since our base is wooden and the silicone would want to push it to the surface. And there are 2 holes so that it gets monolithically bonded, tying it together inside our part. We pour in a thin stream and pour it all into one spot. Let's add another separator, maybe. Our silicone has set. So now it's time to carefully open it up and see what we've got inside. I'm actually really excited to do this unboxing myself. Ta-da! Let them be yellow like. Subtitles by Daima Trozok. So, I'd like to remind you of the long journey we've taken to create just a single glass piece for the lantern. We made a wooden blank, the inner part that goes into the wooden blank, and 3 molds. The Matrix Reload, and the Matrix Revolution, which will be inserted. And this perimeter will be filled with colored epoxy resin, which will become the body of our lantern.
After this long and thorny journey, even the Wachowski sisters would sympathize with their finally getting to the most interesting part. We treat the silicone with a release agent. We take the trusted resin from Ikovana, component A plus component B. Red dye, just by eye for now, and we mix everything thoroughly. This will be a test pour, which will help us understand all the nuances and generally assess the result. Based on this, we'll run color tests, properly tint the resin, and then cast the perfect lantern in a vacuum chamber. At least, that's what we are hoping for.
We're preparing the resin for pouring the lanterns. This time, we've decided to degas it. We put together the simplest vacuum setup, basically on the fly. This is a compressor from a refrigerator. A resin trap was made from plastic couplings. If the operation ever gets out of control, the resin will simply stay in the trap instead of getting into the compressor and potentially ruining it. That's it. And here's the flask itself, where the degassing will take place. We pour the resin into a bucket, but leave some space for foaming and bubbles. We gently and carefully place it in the flask and then close it with a transparent lid. Turn on setup.
another 2 of Andrei's days was spent sanding and perfecting the bodywork. Before carefully applying the final layer of liquid putty, we disassemble our shell as much as possible, and then make our way to the paint booth. We mix several kilograms of liquid putty and apply it evenly to the future body. This compound is designed to level out large surfaces and achieve a body panel as straight as a string. It's impossible to apply an even thin layer all around the perimeter with a spatula, but with a spray gun it's actually quite easy. Later, using a large sanding block or planer, the surface is sanded, and as a result, we'll get smooth sides, a roof, and seals without any glare. This compound dries fairly quickly and thoroughly, so you can move on the next day. Now instead of these blower splitters, or whatever they're called, we didn't make them directly in the mold so as not to complicate the mold itself too much. We would have had to make some separate parts, so we decided to make them later. So we just made these plates, and now we're gluing them in the right places. Later on, we do plan to make them out of carbon fiber, but that will be in the next episode. In the end, we carefully glued these pieces into the pre-made slots, securely reinforced them with fiberglass, enlarged the platform where they're mounted, and once again headed to the paint booth for the final steps. As you remember, not long ago we applied a yellow-brown liquid filler. Several days of sanding by Andre happened off camera. As a result, the bodywork has been brought to perfection. At least that's what Andre assures us. The next step is to apply primer over this layer in our case. 2 coats. The first coat is a grey standard grey primer. Second coat, we tinted it by eye to show you a result that already looks more or less like a real car. Of course this isn't the final paint job, but it's also no longer just boring grey primer. Originally the lower part is made of carbon fiber. We'll do the same thing but just a bit later on. For now, at this stage, we are essentially zoning it by painting it black as a temporary measure. We're doing this in order to achieve a result that visually resembles the original as closely as possible, to put all the elements together in one place, and to assess the intermediate result at the end of this episode. And to do that, as we move forward, we need to get a decorative exhaust tip for the car. In the original, it's made of aluminum. Oleg, our subscriber and a skilled craftsman, kindly agreed to help us with this. We made a model out of combo, tried it on, adjusted it, packed it up, and sent it to Novosibirsk, which is 4,500 kilometers away from us.
We spent a long time and a lot of effort making a silicone mold for the central taillight, planning to cast it from plastic, and we invested quite a bit of time and energy into this. But then we got some sleep and realized that would be too boring for us, so we decided to do something more fun. In the end, we decided to make this central part out of carbon fiber, which means we need a different mold. The old one just won't work anymore. We're gonna make a new mold using a different technique with fiberglass so that we can produce it from forged carbon. Of course, it's a shame about all the effort, time and energy we've already spent, but let's not dwell on that and instead get started on making the new mold as soon as possible. Besides this will be more fun anyway. We could have made so many silicone stars for International Women's Day. Tulips cost 8 rubles. We had to glue the part back together because it broke when we took it out of the silicone. No worries, super glue saved the day. Now we're starting our second attempt at making the mold. We're making a stand for our part so it's easier to work with. We cut out some wooden blocks and are fixing them in place with hot glue. We're going to make the mold using a simplified method. We won't be making any flanges. Since this part is a one-off, the mold will only be used just once, and because of that it will certainly help us save quite a bit of time overall. applied at least 5 layers of hard wax to the part. Next, we gently buff it with a soft cloth. After buffing the wax with a soft cloth, we proceed to apply the gel coat. Let me remind you that gels are very demanding when it comes to thorough mixing. If the gel is not mixed well enough, a defect known as crocodile skin will appear on the surface of the mold. When polyester resin is applied over this uneven layer, it will start to lift and create an unsightly visible defect that will later have to be fixed by sanding or filling, which can be time consuming. That's why we always make sure to mix the gel thoroughly and carefully. For applying the gel, let me remind you that it's best to use a used, already worn out brush from which all the loose bristles have fallen out, one that's already shed and won't leave any of that mess in our product. And it should be as soft as possible so as not to scratch or damage our release layer. Before we cover everything with fiberglass mat, our next step is to work on these small edges and bends, since the fiberglass mat won't lay well here and there will be air bubbles. These spots are often difficult because the mat doesn't easily fit over sharp or uneven surfaces, so it's important to take extra care to smooth them out before moving on. That's why we need to smooth them out somehow. How can we solve this little problem? You can tear the fiberglass mat into narrow strands and lay them into these problem areas to smooth out the shape. But that's a long and tedious process. We'll use a true carry filler. This is a filler with fiberglass. We'll carefully spread and gently smooth out these little corners here, and this outer corner as well. We'll also smooth it a bit more thoroughly with the hairy filler, and that will definitely make our further work with the mold much easier and more manageable. Alright, let's go ahead and start mixing our special secret filler. This is the so-called fiberglass reinforced hairy filler. For extra strength, it's great to add a bit of polyester resin here. This way, we'll kill two birds with one stone. First, the filler will become noticeably thinner and much easier to apply, and as a result, it will also become significantly stronger. Don't forget to add hardener, and remember you need to add exactly 2% hardener to the mixture. The ideal ratio is when the can of filler runs out at the same time as the tube of hardener. We're filling in our groove. And the best spatula is your finger, just like that. Ah, that's satisfying. Let me explain again what's happening now. The previous silicone mold no longer works for us. So we started making another mold using the classic method with fiberglass mat. We applied black gel coat to model, then we filled the most difficult and delicate area with putty. We applied fiberglass cloth and left it to dry.
By that time, the package had finally reached the recipient. As you've probably guessed, the craftsman's name is Oleg, and apparently he didn't spend much time coming up with a name for his workshop. It's called Olega Customs. Funny, I leave all the links in the description. In general, welding aluminum is not the easiest task. But fortunately, Oleg actually specializes in welding exhaust systems made of stainless steel and titanium. He also works on welding car intake systems from aluminum and titanium. He fabricates custom parts from almost any material. In our case, it's a decorative tip. In the original, everything is done exactly the same way. That is, this element is simply mounted in the bumper for decoration, and the exhaust comes up to it without any connection. Only after we install the proper exhaust will the whole picture come together. But more on that a bit later. By that time, Oleg had finished making the aluminum part, using our foam model as a reference, and started preparing it for shipping.
Well, now it's time for the unboxing. As you can see, I also added this reinforcement. It might seem like this is a stand for our mold, but actually it's not. All U-shaped foams, when the polyester cures, they contract and create a lock. So these, the side walls, they get pulled together. And to prevent that from happening, I installed these plywood reinforcements, which will hold this wall in place so it doesn't close up or collapse. Now we're gonna take the plug out of the mold. I'm predicting immediately that we're gonna break it because the shape is pretty complicated due to this central groove. It'll be fun. Let's go!
And this in fact is really the main difference between a soft, flexible silicone mold and a rigid fiberglass mold. But, as you remember, we changed things up a bit, and in this case, we specifically need this kind of top-loading mold. And here, by the way, the self-fulfilling prophecy came true, the wooden glued master model broke. But that's not a problem anymore, since we managed to make a mold from it, in fact, 2 molds. By that time, the long-awaited package had arrived, but not the one you might be thinking of. Oleg's custom order with delivery is still somewhere on the way, and this is a delivery from Fusion. All these gadgets are needed to work properly with carbon fiber. We'll cover this technology next episode.
And the phones got in, here it is, this is carbon fiber. Dynamic music, knock on the door. Let's get started on making the rear light, I guess, or yeah, the light, since it's gonna light up here. So the central rear light, what have we done? We made a matrix. Next, in the mold, we use the transparent polyester gel coat. Here it is, it's applied right now. Next, we lay in the forged carbon fiber that we cut earlier. We'll have 3 types. There's the 220 gram pre-cut, the 400 gram pre-cut, and then some other one I already forgot what it's called. That's it. Next we'll use polyester resin instead of epoxy. We're going against the system. We coat it with polyester resin and carefully lay in the forged carbon fiber. Then to get rid of the bubbles, we'll use this makeshift roller I put together in 15 minutes from an electrode and 3mm washers. We'll roll all of this out. Of course, this work will be done blindly, since we won't be able to see the reverse front side, and we'll have to do everything by touch and by ear. I'm commenting on the article. You change me, your music is fine.
I think everything here is pretty clear visually. Relying on his sense of taste or lack thereof, Andrei lays out the cut carbon piece by piece, mixing different sizes.
And now the second version of our saber has dried. We found some flaws in the first one, made some changes, and with a bit more experience we made the second one. So, what exactly changed in the process? The first one was made from this kind of chopped carbon, 200 and 400 grams. There you go. But for this one, I used this material, the same one we used to make the carbon hood with lighting. By the way, check out the video, it'll be somewhere around here, right here. Of course, such large diamond patterns would really look out of place on such a small part, so I broke them up into these smaller crushed diamonds and laid out this edge. Then everything here was carefully coated with black gel to make it less transparent, since the part is very thin and actually glows. I got the idea to cover it all with this black gel, and it really feels like it finally worked out. Let's take it out. Without removing it from the mold, use a flap disc to trim the part's edges. This way it will look more refined when taken out.
What do you think? I'm just as eager to see how it turned out. Well, at first glance it just looks black because it's matte. Let's wet it with some degreaser. We had to make 3 parts to achieve a more or less decent result. And the next step will be making this central glowing section. There should be a red illuminated strip here, which will serve as the position light. We tried it out, we've already cut out this central part in the piece, so that the glass itself, so to speak, is integrated into this part, making it a single solid piece. There you go. Making the glass for this project is not a simple task, you need to make it matte. Because if the glass is too clear, the LED strip, and especially the individual LEDs, will be visible through it, which can create distracting bright spots and spoil the smooth lighting effect we want. To address this, we are going to try a method where we mix aerosol with casting resin to help diffuse the light, and then tint the mixture with dye to achieve the right color and opacity for our needs. Aerosol is a thickener for resin, a kind of glass micro shavings, like a fine powder, and with its help we will achieve the desired result. The base will be casting resin. The hardener should be gradually and thoroughly added at a precise ratio of 2%, ensuring accuracy. The dye is red. Now let's check the color. Well, our eggnog is ready, and now we'll apply this wonderful mixture in a thick layer, I think about half a centimeter if of course. I can manage to spread it evenly by hand, which can be a little challenging without any special tools. And when it hardens, I really hope it will turn out to be a semi-transparent piece of glass, allowing some light to pass through while still holding its shape. I think looking at this mixture, many people will wonder, is this really a good solution for a lantern? Yes, it does look a bit strange. But the thing is, in the original the diffuser actually looks like this. See for yourself. A strange, opaque, matte insert. This is especially noticeable compared to the transparent red lanterns located on the sides. Jumping ahead a bit, I'll say that this is exactly what we ended up with, and the result is, as you can clearly see, as close to the original as possible. It's also worth noting that this is just a test sample, which we are using to carefully understand and thoroughly evaluate all the subtle nuances involved in the entire process. After this, we'll make additional molds and then proceed to produce the final part, ensuring the very highest quality possible. Subtitles by Zok. A gentle and soothing piece of music is softly playing in the background, creating a calm and peaceful atmosphere. While this item is gradually drying, taking its time, an unsuspecting Andrei, unaware of what is about to happen, meets the courier at the door. Subtitles provided by Zok, with thanks for their contribution. As a result, after all of the expedited delivery, the puzzle is slowly starting to come together. It's finally time to see if we actually managed to make the shell of our lantern. To be completely honest, at first we honestly didn't have very high hopes for this very first experiment, since we're quite used to our own mistakes and failures over the years. This is just an experimental version, created simply to see if we are moving in the right direction, and to figure out exactly what needs to be changed in the manufacturing process, if anything. On the day they're gluing, I really feel like it's the end of the process. And that's it, really, for now at least. But here we were pleasantly surprised, because our test version actually turned out quite well. We're really very happy with the result. In the future, we'll cast these lanterns again, taking minor details into account, and then we'll definitely get the perfect glass piece. The group sheet is not from yesterday. And in order to show you the promised assembled picture in all its glory, we are carefully polishing the lanterns, making sure every surface is smooth and free of imperfections, and getting everything ready for the application of the glossy lacquer finish that will give them their final shine. Subtitles by Daimater Zok. It's exactly the same story with the central carbon part. We take our time to carefully polish it, paying close attention to every little detail, refining and perfecting even the smallest features. Then, together with the lanterns, we apply a protective coat of lacquer, ensuring a beautiful, durable and glossy result. Subtitles by Daimater Zok. While the lacquer is drying, we prepare the last piece of the puzzle fake grills that go in the rear bumper. First we make them out of cardboard. We cut them out using a laser, test fit them, see that everything fits perfectly, and that means we can confidently cut them out of plastic. Subtitles by Daimater Zok for this video. Here, many of you are probably wondering, why is the grill so flat, not three-dimensional? I wonder about that myself. But in reality, that's exactly how the original looks. Thank you for watching, and may you have good fortune from Topor. I won't stop till I wake up the crown.